The stadium lights were supposed to be the story. 48 nations, 3 countries, 1 planet watching. The 2026 FIFA World Cup, the biggest sporting event ever assembled, was meant to be America's moment to show the world what it looks like when the most powerful country on earth opens its arms. Instead, it became a stress test. And before a single ball was kicked, the test was already failing. South Africa's national team could not board their charter flight out of Johannesburg. Visa complications. The team representing one of the co-hosts' first opponents, blocked before the opening ceremony even happened. That is not a scheduling glitch. That is a fault line running directly under the foundation of a tournament that was sold as the most inclusive in history. And the fault line has a name. It was not built overnight. It was built decision by decision, policy by policy, press conference by press conference. This is not about soccer. This is about what happens when the world's most watched event collides with an administration that has turned entry into a pressure chamber. Hotels underbooked, civil rights groups issuing travel warnings, 2/3 of Americans saying they do not want immigration enforcement inside stadiums. The world was invited. Now it is asking whether the invitation was ever real. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what just happened, why the people running this World Cup never saw this collision coming, and why the tournament you were promised in 2018 looks almost nothing like the one kicking off today. Imagine you booked a table at a restaurant 6 years ago. The reviews were great, the neighborhood was buzzing, you told everyone you were going. Then, 3 weeks before your reservation, the management changed. The menu changed. The door policy changed. And on the day you were supposed to arrive, you found out that depending on your passport, your name, your gender, or your politics, you might not even be let in. How long before you cancel? Drop your answer in the comments because that is the exact calculation millions of fans, teams, and travel planners are running right now. Hold that thought because what you just imagined is not hypothetical. It is the operational reality of the 2026 World Cup. Let's rewind the clock. When FIFA awarded the 2026 World Cup to the joint US, Canada, and Mexico bid in 2018, it felt like a safe bet. Massive stadiums, established infrastructure, a tourism industry built for exactly this kind of scale. The economic projections were extraordinary. A potential $30 billion boost for the American economy alone. Hotel chains began planning years in advance. Cities competed aggressively to be named host venues. The pitch was simple. America was ready. America was open. And the world was welcome. That was a different political weather system. What arrived instead was a sequence of decisions no FIFA planning committee had ever modeled. An immigration crackdown making entry unpredictable for citizens of dozens of countries. Travel advisories from over 120 civil society organizations, including the ACLU, warning international visitors about the risks of coming. A Washington Post and University of Maryland poll showing 65% of Americans oppose having IC agents stationed at World Cup stadiums. And a Homeland Security posture so aggressive that its own officials, in live congressional hearings, could not clearly say whether immigration enforcement at tournament venues was on or off the table. The table itself was moving while they were still sitting at it. Receipt number 1, the hotel signal. The LA Times reported that U.S. World Cup hotel bookings are, in their words, very disappointing. Forbes went further with hotel executives describing the tournament as a non-event. The New York Post reported that foreign fans are skipping the United States altogether. In cities that are supposed to be the commercial engine of this tournament, reservation numbers are lagging behind projections by margins that industry analysts cannot explain away as normal variance. This is not a PR problem. When hotel operators in Los Angeles, Miami, and New York say their books are thin, that is the market speaking in the only language it never lies in. Money. The rooms are available. The world is not coming to fill them. That is a receipt. Receipt number 2, the stadium presence debate. Roughly 65% of Americans oppose IC agents being stationed at U.S. stadiums during the World Cup. Not a slim majority, nearly 2 to 3. This is not a poll of nervous foreign travelers. This is a poll of Americans, the home crowd, the people this administration claims to represent, saying they do not want that atmosphere inside the venues. And while that polling was being published, the acting Homeland Security Secretary was in a congressional hearing that devolved into shouting, accusations, and officials unable to articulate a clear, consistent policy on what IC would or would not do at World Cup events. LA County Sheriff Robert Luna said federal officials had assured him there would be no civil immigration enforcement at World Cup matches in LA, then acknowledged that circumstances could change. That caveat is the entire problem. Certainty is the product international travel runs on. Ambiguity is its most effective killer. The signal from the administration was muddled. The consequences are not. Receipt number 3, the exclusion stack. The pressure on this tournament is not coming from one direction. It is compounding from every angle simultaneously. Visa restrictions have left fans from multiple countries uncertain about whether they can even enter. U.S. strikes on Iran, a participating nation, raised the specter of boycotts before the draw was finished. LGBTQ supporter groups, including England's official fan organization Three Lions Pride, announced no visible presence at the tournament. Human Rights Watch called on FIFA to do more to protect queer fans traveling to the U.S. FIFA responded that everyone is welcome. But over 500 anti-LGBTQ laws are currently being tracked across the United States. And a 2025 executive order targeted transgender people across healthcare, identification, sports, and military service. You do not resolve that gap with a press release. The exclusion is structural. Structural exclusion has structural consequences. If this story is connecting dots you haven't seen assembled like this anywhere else, you're already ahead of most people watching this unfold. Hit subscribe right now. This is moving faster than any single outlet can track, and you need to be here when the next piece drops. Most administrations hosting a global event shift into a mode of managed openness. They tune the rhetoric down. They offer reassurances to allies. They give border agencies quiet instructions to make entries smoother, not harder. They understand that the world watching is also the world spending, and that $30 does not materialize if the world decides to watch from home instead. This administration moved in the opposite direction. While other host nation governments were finalizing stadium security protocols, U.S. officials were in televised hearings arguing about whether their posture was racist, threatening to cut off flights to sanctuary cities that happened to be major World Cup hubs, and publicly reminding the media of ICE's presence at sporting events as though that were a selling point rather than a warning sign. The booking numbers dropped. The polling data hardened. The travel advisories stacked up. The response was not a recalibration. It was a doubling down. Mexico managed its own challenges. Cartel violence creating security concerns in its host cities. Canada watched from a careful distance. But neither co-host generated the volume of international anxiety now concentrated on the American leg of this tournament. The pressure valve was always going to be the United States, and the U.S. lit a match next to it. There is a version of this story where the administration looked at the incoming data, the hotel numbers, the polling, the fan group withdrawals, the South Africa charter story, and quietly adjusted, softened the edges, created a visible distinction between general border enforcement and the specific contained atmosphere of a global sporting event. That is what strategic hosting looks like. That window existed. It was not used. You don't outmaneuver a global credibility problem by ignoring the data. You buy yourself time. And time is the one resource this World Cup no longer has. So, what does this mean for you? If you work in hospitality, tourism, aviation, or event services in an American host city, the underperformance is not abstract. Those empty hotel rooms represent real revenue projections that will not be met. If you are a foreign fan who planned to travel, the uncertainty around entry has been real enough that major fan groups reorganized or canceled their visible presence entirely. If you are a brand or sponsor who paid to be associated with the world's biggest sporting event on American soil, you are now attached to a tournament that generated more global headlines about exclusion and fear than about football before it even began. Once a tournament's pre-match narrative is set, it does not reset cleanly. The stories written before the opening whistle follow the event all the way to the final. Once the emergency exit is built into every fan group's travel plan, people remember where it is. And here is the harder truth underneath all of that. Structural shifts in travel behavior do not reverse themselves just because an election happens. Once a company restructures its group travel package around a different host city, it does not rebuild it overnight. Once a fan association decides that visibility at a particular tournament is not worth the legal risk, that calculus does not disappear with a new press release. Once the backup plan becomes the default plan, the old switch loses its power. 3 scenarios from here. The first, a managed correction. Local officials, courts, and quiet diplomatic pressure force a partial de-escalation. ICE maintains its formal posture, but operates with enough restraint that incidents are minimal. The matches happen, some international fans arrive. The economic damage is real but not catastrophic. The tournament finishes, but the lesson that the United States is an unpredictable host has already been taught, and it will shape how FIFA models future bids for years ahead. The structural damage outlasts the tournament itself. The second, the domino effect. Other nations watching what happened to South Africa's charter flight begin coordinating. Fan groups that withdrew their visible presence become a template. Other tournaments, other events, other major international gatherings quietly shift their planning away from the United States. Not in a single dramatic declaration, but in hundreds of small decisions made in offices in Zurich, London, Tokyo, and Sao Paulo. The U.S. remains powerful, but it is no longer the automatic first choice. And slight shifts in gravity compounded over years reshape entire landscapes. The third, escalation. This is the door everyone sees but nobody wants to open. A high-profile incident at a stadium or border crossing. A team or delegation treated in a way that becomes a global flashpoint. A sponsor pulling out publicly. The kind of moment that turns a troubled tournament into a full international incident. Officials are preparing for this privately. Nobody is naming it out loud. The ambiguity that Robert Luna acknowledged, that circumstances could change, is precisely the gap through which that scenario enters. The 2026 FIFA World Cup will never be the tournament it was promised to be in 2018. Even if the football is historic, even if the stadiums fill and the moments are real, the story that preceded it is already written. The cancelled charter out of Johannesburg, the Congressional hearing that turned into a shouting match, the two-thirds of Americans who said they did not want this atmosphere at their own sporting event. Once a country teaches the world that entry is a risk rather than a guarantee, the world does not forget quickly. It builds backup plans. It finds alternative destinations. It learns where the trapdoors are. And it does not throw that knowledge away when the politics eventually calm down. Did this administration's posture damage the World Cup? Or did it simply reveal a pressure chamber that was already there? Is the $30 billion shortfall a policy failure, or a signal that the world is quietly recalculating its relationship with American exceptionalism as a host, as a guarantee of safety, as a destination worth the risk? And is this the first chapter of that recalculation, or the middle of one that started years ago? One that will be studied long after the trophy is lifted and the cameras move on. Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe now because the matches are only beginning and the stories running underneath them. The visa disputes, the stadium standoffs, the booking shortfalls, the diplomatic fallout are not slowing down. Don't look away. This content is commentary and analysis for informational purposes only. It does not constitute financial, legal, or geopolitical advice. Consult qualified experts before making any decisions.